And welcome back to another episode of the Clue Jets podcast. We're hosts Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, what a difference a week makes in the NFL, especially for this team, because last week it was fire everybody. Joe Douglas is a failure. These are the same old Jets. This is never going to change. And this week it's Mike White is the next Tom Brady. So it's a very volatile relationship, Michael, that we have with this team. But what were your thoughts on Sunday's performance, which was maybe the most fun I've had watching a Jets game in a long, long time?
Yeah, and that's what makes the NFL unique. You win a game, you lose a game, and the entire narrative, the entire vibe around a team just completely changes. A week ago we were talking and it felt like there was nothing to feel good about. It was the same old Jets, and that was warranted the way they were playing. But you fast forward a week and they beat the number one seed in the AFC. They pick up more first downs than they have in 35 years. 1986 is the last time that they had as many first downs as they had in this game. Mike White goes off for 400 yards. So many Joe Douglas draft picks play well, and now everything feels great, and it feels like the rebuild is back on track. So things change really quickly. The Jets desperately needed a game like this. They didn't even need to win this game. That is an added bonus, but just to play up, just to compete and play up to the competition of a very good Bengals team that destroyed the Ravens last week. They needed to do that to show that they're a competent team, that they're moving in the right direction, developing talent, building a positive culture in which guys can progress and grow and fit into this team and facilitate winning. They need to show they could do all those things. And even if they didn't win, I feel like they still were on track to accomplishing all of that through 3.5, 4 quarters of this game, but they didn't end up pulling it out because Mike White just happened to absolutely go off for some reason. And Michael Floor is great as well. So there was a lot of positive stuff in this game to get into.
Absolutely. And I think part of the reason it was so fun was because, like you said, it was just I mean, it was a must play well game for the Jets, but it wasn't a must win. The pressure felt very low. It kind of felt like the season was over. It was so dark last week on Jets Twitter that I really didn't even care much to watch this game. Obviously, I was going to, but I didn't really wasn't that excited like I normally am.
Not too much
And
emotional
right,
investment.
right, because like the Titans game, you could argue is more fun because it had maybe more meaning, or whatever. But this was there was very little emotional investment. It almost felt like I was watching a preseason game at the start. But just to watch how this coaching staff rebounded, I mean, it shows you the class difference between this coaching staff and Adam Gase's coaching staff. And not to keep dragging Gase through the mud, but like you go back to 2019, very similar scenario. Young coach, first year coaching staff. Your starting quarterback gets injured, and then I mean, it was a little different because obviously they had Simeon, he got hurt, but you have another guy who's coming in, never really played before, in Luke Falk, and the offense didn't even look like a high school offense. I mean, they couldn't move the ball a yard. And then for them to come out with Mike White and for him to throw 400 yards, which is, Michael, get this, the last time a Jets quarterback threw for 400 yards, you were 2 months old. So, I mean, that is the type of performance they just had. So it was just all across the board. It was, like you said, it was the perfect storm. I think there are two things that I think could have made this Sunday much better. Number one, first and foremost, yeah, you wish it was Zach Wilson, the quarterback of this team for this game, obviously. Number two, if Denzel Mims caught that TD, I think we all would have felt vindicated, but alas, we'll have to wait another week for the Denzel Mims breakout, although he did make a few nice plays. There's a lot to get to. Obviously, a lot in the Cincinnati game. It's a short week, so I guess we should talk about Indy a little bit as well. But let's open it up where, I mean, you can't go anywhere else to start. Mike White. I mean, and as you can tell by the title of this episode, Michael, do you think based off this performance, he's the next Tom Brady? I mean, should we just go ahead and trade Zach Wilson?
Tom Brady did not start this well. So I would say, yeah, and probably twice as good as Brady is.
That's true. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like your math there. But in all seriousness, I mean, Mike White did what we've been asking Zach Wilson to do because it's very obvious from watching him that Zach Wilson's ceiling is significantly higher than Mike White. And also, it should be noted that Mike White, while it's his first start, he is and Michael, you can cover yours, he's a 4-year NFL veteran. I mean, he has been through 4 training camps, 3 full seasons, watching game film with an NFL team, multiple different NFL coaches. I mean, that stuff does build up. You kind of get a feeling of the game, multiple preseason reps. So that should be noted. But you could see the difference in their decisiveness Mike White was actually incredibly accurate, which was pretty surprising, but he was decisive. He took what was given to him. He did all the check down stuff that I guess we've been kind of making fun of Mac Jones for a little bit, but I mean, they got their most first downs they've had since 1988. I mean, they moved the ball consistently. And look, if he even has a deep shot, we don't really know. He threw one deep bomb that was kind of way off, but if he has a deep ball, you can be a top 5 quarterback with the type of offense that he was playing. Now, look, Indianapolis now has seen the short stuff. It's a short week, so maybe they don't have enough time to completely adjust, but teams are going to key in on when you throw the ball short that often, and that's when you might have to adjust. But just based off this performance, Michael, what were the biggest differences you saw in how Zach Wilson was handling this offense versus how Mike White was handling? Do you think it was all about the QB, or do you think maybe the offensive coordinator or the players around him were a big part of the difference in performances?
I think we saw a little bit of everything. I think Michael Floor definitely coached a much better game. And yes, Mike White did, the way he played is a better fit to unlocking this system than the way Zach Wilson has played so far. But I do think Michael Floor was legitimately better and more creative. I mean, Jameson Crowder threw 2 passes in this game. And I think that really just sums up how creative he was. We saw a lot. We saw more screens and they were better timed. They worked better just in terms of the situations he pulled them out and the situations that he placed the receivers on those screens in, being able to have room to work with. He actually, a big part of this performance too, is I think that LaFleur really established the motion as more of a threat, because there were plays in the last game against the Patriots where Elijah Moore or someone else would come in motion and nobody on the defense would move at all. They show no respect for that because the Jets haven't shown that they're going to do anything out of that motion. But with last week, kind of building off of that, Elijah Moore scores on an end around, and then the Jets come out in this game and they get creative fairly early. Now it becomes more of a threat. And we saw throughout this game that when the Jets were motioning people, it was creating movement in the Cincinnati defense. And a lot of their productive running plays, even if it was just, a run up the middle, were partially thanks to the threat of that motion, just moving a linebacker a little bit or moving a safety a little bit to create a little bit more space for a run to work. So I think LaFleur is much better. And I love how aggressive he came out on that first drive, being very pass heavy. I love that throughout the game, he stayed pass heavy, but also pulled out the run in spots where it made sense. And the run game
would you have guessed that
because of that?
Would you have guessed that Mike White would throw 45 passes in this game, and that the fact that the Jets would win?
I would think that was possible, but only because they would be down 20 in the first half and you were checking it down for the entire game, because he threw 32 last game in 2.5 quarters.
Yes, that's true.
So for him to throw 45, but like you're saying, for him to throw 45 because the Jets want to do that and because the passes are working is absolutely incredible. And his efficiency in this game, he averaged 9 yards per attempt, and the Jets' longest reception in this game was 26 yards, so that's an incredible level of efficiency to throw that many passes, be that efficient per pass. And it's not like they had an enormous 80-yard touchdown pumping it up. It was just 10 yards, 15 yards, 8 yards, time after time again. And he was just so decisive. I think he made, as much as LaFleur schemed up a good game plan, I think we have to give a lot of credit to White's pre-snap reads and moving that into post-snap, because he just knew where the ball needed to be and he got the ball there very quickly. His accuracy was great, like you said, 37 for 45 in this game. And yeah, he did, not throw the most difficult passes in the world, but the ball was where it needed to be every single time. He didn't make receivers have to make extra efforts to catch the ball. It was right on the numbers. If it was a dump off, if it was an out-breaking route, it was putting the ball in stride so they could run through it, and on screens and throws into the flat too. Ball was where it needed to be so the receiver could catch it in stride and make plays. He did miss that one. It got called back because of McGovern's holding, but he did miss Elijah Moore in that deep bomb. And there was potential touchdown to Carter on a wheel route in the first half that really should have been a pick six. But other than that, he was really solid. And the 2 picks he did throw, they weren't great plays, but they weren't interception worthy plays. They just got tipped up. So they were bad luck. But he was just so sharp, so smart, consistent, accurate. This is the pinnacle game manager performance, I think. Just the level of consistency, the level of accuracy was sublime in this game. He was great.
Right. I mean, look, I would take any game manager that throws for 400 yards. I think there's two things that were really evident. One, I don't know what is going on in the booth, but Michael Floyd just seems incredible, way more comfortable up there. It just seems, I guess it makes sense that, you're looking down in the field and all the players look like ants and you can kind of just see different openings because when they put him down on the sideline, and granted, I give the Jets credit. I mean, he was in the booth during the green and white scrimmage. Zach Wilson struggled. They said, okay, Zach wants to be able to talk to him on the sidelines. Let's move him down. And then obviously that hasn't really been working. So they're moving back up. They're at least adapting to, they're making changes to try to get ahead of things. They're not just stuck in their ways. So I respect that. But it's just very clear that he can just see the field a lot better. And I think the other thing that really opened things up for White was the run game. I mean, they haven't really had a game yet where they were able to establish themselves this well on the ground. They've had other games like the New England game. They were all right there. Obviously Tennessee, they won, but like this is the first time, and this offense is just so predicated on being able to run the football. And I think a big part of the Jets' plans were having Mekhi Becton next to Elijah Vera-Tucker on that left side because it's saying no matter what, the bread and butter of this offense is going to be run left. And then when you take him out, and now you have more of a pass protection guy on the left side and George Fant. Maybe you run to the right side because Morgan Moses is a good run blocking tackle, but then right next to him is Greg Van Roten. So their run game has been kind of stunted because it's there are benefits and cons to each side of the offensive line in terms of the run game. But Michael Carter is special. I mean, you can see that already. And we've talked about this on this podcast before, but what separates, because running back is quote unquote the easiest position in the NFL, you can put mostly any draft pick in that spot, and they should be able to do all right. You see this with Michael Pirine in the last 2 years, where it's like, okay, yeah, they give him the ball, or I guess last year, you give him the ball, maybe he gets 4 yards, and then you can look at the coach's film and be like, where else was he supposed to go? There's a guy right there. But the difference is what you can do that is above and beyond. Your ability to break tackles, obviously your vision, his contact balance. I mean, there's a lot of things with Michael Carter that just scream, top tier RB1. And, look, this is one game, but we've seen it throughout the entire season that it's not very often the first guy brings him down. And if you have a running back with that type of trait, the amount of things that does for an offense, it's massive, especially this type of offense. And I hope the one thing that obviously you hope that Zach Wilson is picking up on is Mike White's willingness to throw to the running backs. I mean, his willingness to take the checkdowns, not just to the receivers and the tight ends, but Mike White made a living, especially on third downs, just throwing to Ty Johnson and Michael Carter and putting the ball in the hands of those players and letting him make a play. And a guy like Michael Carter, especially, he was making the best of that situation. I guess just speak to what you've seen from Michael Carter, because obviously you've been very much on the pro Michael Carter train ever since we've seen a glimpse of his elusiveness, but now to really get a full game dose of I would go as far to say an elite performance from Michael Carter. How do you feel about the 4th round draft pick?
Yeah, I don't think it is a stretch to say it was elite. I mean, he put up 172 yards from scrimmage in this game, 77 rushing, 95 receiving, his second straight game over 100. But like you said, it's the elusiveness that really defines a running back's value, because pretty much any running back can take the handoff or catch the pass, get what's there. But it's what do you do after that first guy gets there? What extra do you add to the play beyond what the situation presented? And he consistently gets more than what the situation draws up for him. And in the run games, just ankle tackles never bring him down. And in the passing game, he had so many great after the catch plays in this. There's one play near the end where there are 3 guys on top of him. It looked like he was down, but crawled over the guy and kept going. He was fantastic in this game, both as a rusher and receiver. And like you said, it's now that Carter's really establishing himself as such a high quality receiving option, it's Zach Wilson's got to come back and recognize that and know that there's so much to be gained just by taking that safe dump off, because those have been there this year and Wilson hasn't really taken them as much as he should have. But with Mike White displaying in this game and hopefully against the Colts as well, what can be yielded simply by taking that easy pass. That's the biggest thing I think Zach Wilson can learn from watching Mike White in this game. But Carter for sure has been, he looks like a legitimate running back one. I know he's, because of the frame, people don't necessarily see him as a prototype.
Hey, Aaron Jones
he's using that. Yeah. Like you're going to say with Aaron Jones, like that, he uses that to make himself an elite player because it's harder to bring him down at such a small frame, and his contact balance is still good even as a smaller guy. So he looks great.
Yeah, obviously Derrick Henry has kind of changed things in terms of how running back size is viewed. But for a long time, I mean, look at like Barry Sanders, Maurice Jones-Drew. We talk about Aaron Jones. There's a lot of guys who are 5'8", and that they use that to their advantage, especially when they have huge legs like Michael Carter does. He's just so strong and he's so hard to bring down because that center of gravity is so low. I think this was just the first game where we truly got to see the offense. I mean, and obviously the Tennessee game was great and they put up a lot of points or whatever. But if you notice, like, a lot of the big plays was kind of Zach Wilson creating, playing that backyard football, directing Corey Davis to go deep or, breaking the pocket. But this was the first time I think you really got to see in structure Mike LaFleur just, I mean, slice and dice the entire Bengals defense all day, just with how creative he was. And also you have to give us a shout out, not only in the run game, but pass protection. I thought the offensive line was fantastic because, for a guy like Mike White, because he's not the most athletic, although he did catch that 2-point conversion, that's where you could really see the struggles. And the difference between him and Zach Wilson is I don't foresee Mike White shaking too many sacks, but the protection was clean. They were able to establish the run. He was taking what was open. You got to see a lot of the creativity that I think we've been kind of pining for as Jets fans for a long time. You see all these other teams running these fun trick plays. They get a little fancy. And it's like, why don't the Jets ever do that? And then every once in a while, Gase would throw, a little trick play in there. But it's like, because LaFleur was able to establish those long drives. And as I was saying to Michael before we recorded this podcast, it's like, it's not necessarily that he maybe changed so much up, because it's like with Zach Wilson, the Jets were just not staying ahead of the sticks. I mean, off the bat, and you notice the Jets took the opening kickoff and elected to receive, which I think was a clear indication. They're like, let's start fast. Let's not get onto the field down 7-0, because a lot of times this season, the Jets have gotten onto the field in the first quarter. Their defense gets gashed or whatever it is. They're down. It's a big 3rd and 7 or whatever after 2 runs, and it's a drop. And that's a quick 3 and out. But in this game, they were able to get those key 3rd downs. They were able to keep the chains moving. They were staying ahead of the sticks. And then you got to see those 10, 11, 12 play drives, and you got to see LaFleur get deeper into the playbook. I was thoroughly impressed with him. Now, here's the question, Michael, with Zach Wilson. If Mike White plays well on Thursday, there's going to be a lot of people that will be saying, stick with Mike White. Don't put Zach Wilson back in there against Buffalo. What are your takes on the supposed QB controversy? Because I'm not buying it just yet, but I'd like to hear your thoughts first.
For me, I think regardless of what Mike White does in this game, even if he is just as good as he was in this Bengals game, I think you have to go back to Zach Wilson. But then from there, it is going to get really awkward, and it's going to be very high pressure for Wilson, because the moment he goes 3 and out to open a game, the moment he throws a pick in the first quarter, he's going to hear the noise from that MetLife crowd. He's going to hear the noise in his head mentally, just thinking about that. So it is going to be a tough situation for him. But I think there is positive to that. Being a franchise quarterback is about dealing with pressure. It's about being able to handle adversity. And this is going to be his chance to come into an offense. If Mike White plays well again in this Colts game, this will be his chance to come into an offense that's built momentum, shown what it is capable of being with this infrastructure, with this coaching staff. So he's got to come in there and prove that he's capable of earning it. So I don't think in that first game, if he plays well, you think about benching him unless he's atrocious. But that if Mike White does play well again against the Colts, and then you turn back to Wilson against the Bills, that, the option of benching him for White is going to be there as the season goes on if he really struggles. So I think you have to go back to him. And hopefully he does learn from watching White. Hopefully the Jets can use the momentum they've built, LaFleur back in the booth, and use all that to put him in a better position, and he can take advantage of that. But that chance, that option of switching to White is going to be there. So Wilson is going to have to respond in a really high pressure situation. That's how I see it. But what would you do if White plays well in this game?
So there's 2 ways to look at it. I mean, you're talking about the pressure that Zach Wilson's under, because while we can praise the coaching staff for the difference between how Gase handled Luke Falk and how LaFleur and Saleh have handled Mike White, the difference was the pressure in 2019 was really not on Sam Darnold at all when he came back from being sick with mono, because they got to see another quarterback be absolutely lifeless. The first time he got a first down, I remember that Cowboys game. I think it was like the first play, he hit like a 20-yard crossing route to Demaryius Thomas, and it was just like eruptions of cheers at MetLife. I mean, so the pressure was so low that all he had to do would come in and be just a little bit better, and he was going to get praised for it. It's the reverse of this. It's like, does Zach get in his head if you try to put him back out there and he starts to struggle? Like you said, I think it's good mental training. You have to be able to handle the adversity, especially in this market. The other way to look at it is, maybe he does more of what Darnold did in 2018 when he was out. A little bit of a different situation. McCown's a longtime veteran. McCown didn't light the league on fire when he was playing, but as we were talking about last week, he got to watch a guy come in there, do the job, not make as many mistakes, kind of run the offense. And then he got to catch his breath. And then when he came back, he was a lot better. So you're hoping to see more of the 2018 Darnold than obviously 2019 Darnold didn't pan out as well. But you're hoping that you can take the positives of watching a guy without the negatives of feeling the pressure that he's playing better than you. For me, obviously you have to go back to Zach Wilson. Because look, I think I like Mike White. I think, especially considering the whole James Morgan debacle, it saves a little face for Joe Douglas if he turns out to be a long-term backup, but it's one game. I mean, he very well might just be our Nick Mullins or Gardner Minshew, which is fine. That's great. I mean, the fact that they found him, you could have a long-term backup. That's great. But he was taking dump offs, and obviously he was very decisive and accurate, and he did show a lot of positives. It's one game. There's a very likely scenario. I shouldn't say likely. It's very possible that he could go and shit the bed on Thursday and against Indianapolis, and this is a moot point. He is not the franchise quarterback at this point. Look, if he goes and lights it up against Indianapolis, and then let's say Zach misses another game and he lights it up and Zach starts to struggle, then you can put Mike White back in. But I don't think you just hand the keys over to Mike without giving Zach Wilson a chance to respond. All this did, if he plays well next week, like you said, all it does is it establishes benching Zach Wilson in favor of Mike White as a realistic option. I don't think you can just go, ride out Mike White for the rest of the season and not give Zach a chance to respond. I will say, however, I would sit Zach Wilson for not only Thursday, I would sit him against Buffalo. Because why would you do that to your rookie quarterback? If you mean everything you've said, unless they shit the bed on Thursday against Indianapolis. Let's say Mike White plays well on Thursday. So we're facing that decision. If when you drafted Zach Wilson, you said we're going to do everything in our power to uplift you, you're not going to have to uplift this franchise. Don't put him in there at home against the number one defense in the league, a Super Bowl contender in Buffalo. After the backup quarterback has had two straight great weeks, give Mike White that chance. And most likely he'll play He'll play okay. And you give Zach another week to get healthy. And then Zach comes home or comes in next week against the Dolphins. He has 5 other games after that that are very winnable. That's how I would play it. I would give Mike White the next 2 games, and then you go back to Zach regardless of what happens. But yeah, if Mike sucks on Thursday, then maybe you go back to Zach a little earlier. But it'll be.
I have a thought about this whole situation because I feel like there's an awkwardness to it. There is an awkwardness to it, and you sort of feel like that you would rather not have Mike White play well, and you'd rather just see Wilson get in there and play well as scheduled. But I feel like this is a good problem to have because if either one of these guys is the real deal, if White really is as good as he showed in this game, obviously he's not going to throw for 400 yards every game. But if he really is as sharp as he looked in this game, if Zach Wilson is the real deal, they're going to emerge. There's no such thing as, that this awkwardness is going to ruin it for Wilson or get White hidden. If one of these guys is the real deal, they will emerge. So for the Jets to now have a second guy who could be that, and it's only one game, so let's not overreact, but it was a great one. So for the Jets to now have a second guy who could be that franchise quarterback, I think is a very good thing.
Yeah. Okay. It's a little, I know.
Not to put him on that pedestal, but just to have a second quarterback.
I get what you're saying.
Obviously, those words are too strong. Just have a second valuable quarterback is more what I'm saying.
I think the point that you're trying to make is that in our minds, you'd rather this whole situation be a lot cleaner, that the guy you took number 2 overall, your rookie quarterback, he comes in, he's the savior of the franchise, and not the backup, guy you signed who got cut by Dallas. It's his 4th year. He's 26. But at the end of the day, we're just looking for a franchise quarterback. So if it's a kid from Western Kentucky or if it's a kid from BYU, it shouldn't really matter, even though we would all prefer it to be Wilson. And Wilson's ceiling is, incredibly high. I think Mike White has proven that he has a higher floor, but Mike White's ceiling isn't even close to Zach Wilson. And part of the reason you take a guy like Zach Wilson is you let him take his lumps, and then when he gets better, you might have a guy who's in the upper echelon of quarterbacks. Because when I watch Zach Wilson play, obviously he has that loose arm, which is a plus, but everything else about him, I mean, it's I don't want to say sloppy, but his footwork it's like lackadaisical, relaxed. He's not as decisive as White was.
I think it can be called that right now. I think sloppy is accurate right now.
Right. I mean, he's playing too much backyard football, and it's a problem that Darnold had, but he's a little too overconfident in his arm, which isn't necessarily a bad trait. I like that he takes chances, but he has to watch what Mike White did and learn it's okay to take your 3-step drop, you can throw to the flat, dump it off to your running back, take the first read that's open. You don't have to get 30 yards every play. You saw what Mike White did, just throwing, underneath the sticks pretty much every play and getting 10 yards regardless. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you'd all prefer it to be Zach Wilson. It's way too early to say anything about Mike White, but yeah, I mean, it would be a good problem to have if Mike White plays well on Thursday and hell, maybe even next Sunday against Buffalo. I guess let's move away from the quarterbacks a little bit, unless you have anything else to add, because I do want to talk about some of the other positives from this game. And I think first and foremost, this was maybe not the first game, probably the most notable game where a Joe Douglas draft class just took it over. I mean, even Jabari Zuniga got in and got a sack. If Denzel Mims caught that touchdown, it would really be a coming out party for Joe Douglas's draft classes. But when you look at the way Bryce Hall played, when you look at the way that obviously this year's draft class played, we talked to Michael Carter, Elijah Moore got involved. Elijah Moore may have saved the game with his touchdown saving tackle in the first quarter, considering the Jets only won by 3 and then they got a goal line stand there. I thought Brandon Echols held his own. I just think, and obviously Elijah Vera-Tucker has been money outside of his debut week 1. What were your thoughts on the Joe Douglas draft picks making some noise today? You kind of got to see a little bit of what we've been hoping when we draft these players and what we envision. We always kind of think of the best case scenario, and I think today was one of the rare times we've actually gotten that.
It was really fun to watch, and that's the best aspect of these late season wins when you're out of playoff contention. Although I wouldn't rule it out with Mike White at quarterback. But when you're out of playoff contention, you, as much as you want to win games, you would prefer to have these perfect world wins where all your young guys, your future pieces are helping you do it. And this really was that kind of win. We talked about Michael Carter. I think AVT was visibly good in this game. It's in the run game in particular. I think there were a lot of plays where you could see him leading the way. Elijah Moore finally had a tangible impact on the game. He scored a touchdown last week, but he's finally a consistent impact player, which I don't think him not being that so far is necessarily his fault because he's been open a lot. I've written multiple articles, posted a bunch of tweets of him being open, but in this game, we finally saw that be capitalized on. 6 for 67, caught all of his targets, had a 4-yard run. The play you mentioned was doesn't go in the stat sheet, but that is an enormous play, that hustle to save that pick 6. So he was excellent. And then, Mims got involved, made a little bit of an impact. Would have been nice to see him catch that touchdown. Jabari Zuniga gets in there, records a strip sack. I kind of, honestly, I forgot he was still on the team before they promoted
Practice
him.
squad.
Yeah. I forgot he was even affiliated with them at all before they promoted him. So he comes alive. There was a lot to like from the Joe Douglas guys in this game.
Yeah, I think the only performance from a Joe Douglas guy that you really can't like is Ashton Davis, who I thought was pretty brutal today. What do you think the Jets do with Davis? Because, look, I mean, he was a rookie last year. He was raw. It was reported the Jets had a first-round grade on him, and that's why they took him, despite not really at the time having a needed safety. And then he has mostly a down rookie year. He have a kind of a good game against New England, or at least he had some big hits. Then he's injured for a whole year and he comes back. And what is his role? Because it kind of seems like the Jets are trying to play him as a bit of a box safety, but he wasn't drafted to be that. He is, in my opinion, too small to be a box safety, although he does hit hard. Seems like he's more of a natural free safety, but his coverage ability and his natural instincts just really aren't there. Do you think this is a guy that the Jets should just ride out for the rest of the season, see if any improvement is there? Do you think they should try to bench him? Because it seems like multiple times, maybe it was just more noticeable today. It seems like he was a big problem on defense.
Yeah, this was definitely his worst game. I don't think he's been good so far this year, but he definitely did not have a game where he was as negatively impactful as this game. He gave up that huge bomb over the top to set up the next play in which he gave up the touchdown. He had a few other missed tackles in this game. He's definitely just a beat late to be playing in the back end like he is, because obviously he's got all the speed in the world, but that can't make up for it when you don't know where to be and when to be there. He's just not reading plays, making smart decisions. On that one bomb, like a lot of people were blaming Marcus May, and May probably could have played it a little bit better. I'd have to watch it again, but the main reason that bomb happened is because Ashton Davis just got caught underneath. He should have been deep to cover the outside in that play, and he wasn't. So it's really tough right now because I feel like he played well in the box last year, but that's obviously not ideal because he is a very skinny guy who I don't think has the frame for that. And the reason you drafted him is to maximize his speed down the field. But right now he's not instinctual enough to be able to play that role. So it is really tough in terms of how they can handle him right now, because obviously you want him to play, to be able to get reps, be able to improve. But he is like, I think he was the worst player on the field for them on either side of the ball in this game. So, but I think that's what they were willing to sign up for this season. I think they're willing to deal with those growing pains, to evaluate these guys, to allow them to show their potential. So I think he is going to stay out there. But in terms of his role, I honestly think they should go back to using him how Greg Williams was using him near the end of last season. Play him in the box at strong safety. I think that's really where he was at his best. I know it's not ideal, but he really did look pretty good. He played physically. He played tough when he was out there in the box. He was able to, he took on fullbacks really well. His speed off the edge as a blitzer can be utilized better in there. So that's what I would do. But this was a rough game for him. He's got to be better.
Well, so I agree that I thought he played better, and that is probably what they will do. Although Salah's safeties are used a lot differently than Greg Williams. But before the podcast, we were kind of talking about how when you saw Jarrad Davis out there, and look, it's not like he made too many flashy plays, but he's more of a thumper in the box. I mean, he didn't get moved as easily. And I think the big example of Ashton Davis and the problem of potentially playing him in the box full time is because he's so small. I mean, you look at the one trick play the Bengals had where they threw it back to Mixon and he ran like 50 yards inside the 10. I mean, Ashton Davis just gets taken completely out of the play. I mean, he couldn't even do anything. He couldn't hold his ground at all, take a better angle, I mean, he just looks like he was a kicker on that play. And I think that's the issue with playing him in the box.
I think that play is more about, free safety issues and him not taking a good angle or having the instincts to, he should maybe attack that play more aggressively.
But you saw him
when he was in the box last year. I know he's smaller, but there were plays where he was very willing to put his shoulder down. And like, there was one play against the Pats last year, the night game, where he just completely went low and took out the fullback and made the running back go down just from flipping the fullback into the air.
There's no bones about it.
I feel like he has the capability to do that.
I don't disagree with you that he certainly is a hard hitter, and so is Buster Skrine. I mean, Buster Skrine was pound for pound maybe the strongest guy on the team, but at the same time, it doesn't mean you want to play him in the box. I mean, I get what you're saying, but he clearly has the build for a free safety, and if you put him in the box, like right now, I agree with you. I think that is what he's playing best at, but you can see the issues with having a strong safety who is that small. It's like, any sort of running play that's coming at with a blocker in front, he just gets, for the most part, obliterated. I mean, if he has the ability to get a full head of steam, though, like if he was a box safety and he's blitzing or whatever, maybe he plays a little better. But when he's on his back foot like that, I mean, it just wasn't fair. But at the same time, I don't know how many games at this point that he's played, but I don't even think he's hit a full 16 yet, or I guess 17 now, because he was injured at the start of his rookie season, and then he's been injured at the start of this season. So he's still a young player. And I think they just ride it out for the rest of the season with him, even though he probably was the worst player in the field. And then if he's really bad the entire season, you probably have to go find another safety and then regulate him to a 3 safety role, which I think he could be very good at because of his natural athleticism. Play him on special teams, use him as a 3 safety, because that's what he is right now to me. But like any other player on this roster, any of these young guys, he certainly has the potential to improve. Let's change our tune a little bit. We've been talking about the young guys a lot. Let's talk about the MVP of this team. And you want to talk about more Ashton Davis?
I actually do a little bit.
Okay.
I think the biggest takeaway from our conversation is this. We don't have one skill that we can point to and be like, you know what, Ashton Davis is pretty good at that. Between what I'm saying and what you're saying, I don't think either of us can agree or anyone can come to an agreement on, you know, Ashton Davis has this skill that he can offer.
Yeah, it's
and
hard.
that's a problem. So, I mean, he does when he's not completely whiffing by diving at the ankles. So, I mean, he can hit hard, but I feel like a lot of NFL players can do that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. That pick is definitely looking kind of shaky right now. But
Yeah,
but did we
the
talk
best
about Eccles and Hall? I think we got to talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. Go. Feel free because I was thoroughly impressed with Bryce Hall. He had that one break up in the end zone that was amazing. And Eccles, I thought held his own because at the start of the game, obviously the Jets corners typically don't follow; they stay on their side. At the start of the game, you could see how smart the Bengals were. They were just putting Chase on the left side, one-on-one against Eccles, and he got burned a few times. But I think overall, Eccles held his own.
Yeah, I thought Eccles played a good game for the most part. Obviously, he gave up the touchdown to Chase in the beginning of the game, but after that, he made that really nice deflection, kind of holding off the deep ball later in the game. Didn't give up too much else. And for a 6th-round pick, who's a starting corner, I think he's done a very nice job and can be
Absolutely.
the long-term starter opposite Hall. I think you look for an upgrade, but I think he can be a good piece, you know, a good backup at worst. But Hall in this game, he did give up the one touchdown, but that was a really long play. I don't know how many corners would stop that play where you're playing inside and the receiver's running at you and then he just cuts out because the quarterback has 6 seconds to throw the ball. I think that was more on the pass rush. But other than that, Hall had a great pass deflection in the end zone on Jamar Chase. He matched up against him a few times and didn't really give up much of anything. Chase in this game at 32 yards. That was a season low. Only 3 catches. So I think the corners played a solid game, even though they did give up a couple touchdowns. They really kept an explosive Bengals offense in front of them. I mean, Burrow had 259 yards in this game on 34 passes. That's well below where he's been the past few weeks. So I feel like those two guys did a nice job for sure.
What really stood out to me there, Michael, wasn't honestly anything you said. It was what you didn't say, and that was basically just assuming that Hall, and for good reason, is the long-term cornerback one. I think that's the biggest thing that stands out to me, and how impressive he has been.
Right.
That it's not even a question that he's our long-term starter at corner. I mean, I think throughout the entire season, he's proved why he was so highly touted coming out, and if he didn't get injured, he would have been a much higher pick. Because I mean, even going back to last season, he was good. It seems like he did make a jump over the offseason. You could kind of see it from those training camp videos of him going 1v1 against Elijah Moore. I've been so impressed with Bryce Hall. And I think, look, a lot of the criticism the Jets got were 2 things over the offseason. One was not doing anything at corner, including cutting Bless Austin. And 2 was not doing anything at backup quarterback, not bringing in a veteran. And both of them, I mean, I know they traded for Flacco, who I guess we can talk about in a second. But both of those things, you have to give some credit to the Jets coaching staff and personnel department because they both look like the right move. Like you said, I don't think you want to bank on Eccles as being cornerback 2. I think you kind of you can make the mistake there of just being content with him because he's a young guy. I like him. I think you want him to continue to grow. I think, like you said, he's flashed that potential. I still think you should be aggressive on trying to add more corners to this roster. But the fact that Bryce Hall has established himself as the Jets cornerback 1, and that's not an embarrassing stat to say, is really good. I mean, when was the last time the Jets had a day 3 pick like that? Who was just able to flat? I mean, it's just been so long the Jets have had a day 3 pick who had the hype build up by Jets fans, and then he actually lived up to it. I mean, I think that's the most impressive thing to me. And this draft class obviously played great all day. I was going to get to this a little earlier, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on this. We've talked a lot about the young guys. We have to talk about the veterans, and none bigger than CJ Mosley. I mean, if you can't watch last week's game and this week's game and see why CJ Mosley is worth every penny and is the MVP of this team, I don't know what to tell you. I know he missed a few tackles at the end of the game, but regardless, he is the heart, soul, mind. He is everything to this Jets defense. And I think on paper, giving $18 million, $19 million to a middle linebacker isn't smart. Probably not good business. The Jets definitely overpaid, but I think he's worth every penny.
Yeah, you can just see the impact that he had between last week and this week, how important he is for getting everyone set, getting everyone in the right place, and then just himself fundamentally, even if he's not making big plays on the ball, he just knows where to be in the run game, in coverage to allow other players to make big plays. Because the main reason the Jets got destroyed so badly against the Patriots is because those linebackers were just never in the right place. In the run game, they were getting washed out the second level. They were filling the wrong gaps in coverage. They were letting passes fly over their heads because they couldn't feel out the route concepts around them. Mosley knows where to be. He fills the right gaps. He has a good feel for the routes around him. He shuts down passing lanes. He just makes such a huge impact on the entire defense. And I don't know if we talked about Jared Davis yet, but I thought he played pretty well in this game. He didn't make a ton of big plays on the ball, but there's just a difference in having a guy like Jared Davis, a 245-pound thumper with great athleticism, and who the Jets have had at linebacker next to Mosley, Quincy Williams, Jamie and Sherwood, guys who are much smaller linebackers, around 215. He just brings a lot more meat in the run game, and there wasn't as much space. He did a much better job of filling, taking on blocks, and he was definitely a positive. I think he made a positive impact in this game, and I'm excited to see what he can continue to do going forward. But Mosley, for sure, he's had a fantastic season and is earning that contract. I think you can, maybe think about restructuring him after the season, but as of right now, I don't think you have, any issues about paying him that in the next couple of years if he continues to play this way.
I know Douglas could be stingy with the money, but I don't even think, if he keeps playing the way he's playing, I don't think he touches money, especially since the Jets have so much cap space already. And damn well Douglas isn't going to use it all in one offseason. So I get what you're saying. I think long-term, it's definitely not smart to be playing a middle linebacker that much. But when he's playing well, you can't really complain. The hope is, the problem with free agency is you pay these big contracts and inevitably there's a reason the guy got out. Either he's getting old or his position isn't as important, or whatever it is. There's not many times a blue chip player hits free agency. You'd rather those big contracts go to the guys within your organization that you drafted, in large part because they're probably worth it. And the guys in the free agent market, they probably aren't worth it. But CJ Mosley is the rare example of the guy who is completely worth it and slipped out of Baltimore for, just because Mike McCagnon overpaid him that much. But I think he's worth every penny. And like you said with Davis, it was kind of the point I was making with Ashton Davis. There's just a difference when you're in the box like that. Quincy Williams is a fantastic athlete and obviously a big hitter, just like Ashton Davis. But Jarrad Davis, like you said, he just was able to bring the mass that's necessary in the run game. Was able to hold the second line of defense a lot better, because that was a big issue last week, was the linebackers were just getting shredded with no Mosley or no Davis. And I think Davis, the other thing to remember, speaking of overpaying linebackers, Davis was the one contract this offseason I think everybody would have said, that's a little high. Every other guy was a bargain, but that was the one that, if you listen to reports, there was a lot of teams in on Jarrad Davis. The Jets wanted him bad. They went up. I think they paid him, $7-8 million. And they got him, which is a little higher than I think we thought he was going to get. But you could see why. You could see that he is a very good fit for this defense. And he's a guy that I think could be here, past this year. What I can't stop thinking about is just, even a guy like Quincy Williams, who is exciting. Now he's in that third linebacker role, where he doesn't have as much pressure. Like you're saying, he can play on more of those passing downs. You don't have to play him in every single down. I'm thinking about how good this team will be with just one more offseason to just an influx of talent, whether it's through the massive cap space they have, or the 2-1s, the 2-2s, the 3 and the 3-4s. It's like, that's just another Joe Douglas offseason to just influx this roster and move guys like Quincy Williams, who may be good, down to more role player, roles. I think, I don't know, maybe it's overreacting just based off one game, but I really do think this Jets team is going to take a big jump next year. And I know we've been saying that for a while, but I really do think this year the pain will be worth it, because I think 2022 is going to be the jump that we've been waiting for.
And with games like this, you can legitimately say that. And that's the point of the season, is to have games like this one, even if you don't win them, because just with the talent you see across the roster, you're like, okay, if we can use all these assets to fill just a couple more holes that are holding us back,
right? Like,
this can
get a tight
legitimately
end,
be a great team.
get 2 tight ends, get a right guard, probably another center.
Right.
You want to bulk up, maybe another corner. You're probably gonna have to redo the safety. I mean, there's still holes in this team, but then it's like, oh, Zach Wilson's entering his second year. You have because I was watching, old. I shouldn't even say it feels weird that I'm saying old, but Rex Ryan Jets teams, 2009, 2010, and then I was even watching some Favre Jets, just because I was trying to see what do the good Jets teams look like. I mean, what were the biggest differences? And one of the things is they had proven guys at every position, and I think it's like you wouldn't look at receiver necessarily as a need for the Jets because you're like, well, the Jets have Elijah Moore, but the truth of the matter is Elijah Moore hasn't really done anything yet. He has all the potential in the world and all the promise, and so you could fill him in, and that's a need filled, but he hasn't proven it yet. Obviously, we're excited about the ceiling. But the thing with this Jets team is because they don't have really many proven players, you're going to see games like they had last week. But when you see games like this Sunday, that's just another step in the right direction of proving Joe Douglas right and silencing a lot of the hate. I mean, I was blown away by this performance. I have to be honest. This was not a game that I thought the Jets would be competitive in, and it's certainly not one that they would have won under Adam Gase. So it was just a big win for the organization and this coaching staff. Now let's look ahead a little bit because it is a short week, Michael. I doubt we'll have another podcast ahead of Indy. Let's talk about it. I mean, what are your thoughts? Obviously, Indy just had a heartbreaking loss in overtime against Tennessee. Indy had been, I think they won, 3 of the last 4 or something like that. The Jets are on the road. Clearly, the Jets are a much better home team. But Indy's vulnerable. I mean, Carson Wentz is not good. Mike White is a god. We've seen that already. What are your expectations for this game? I think you asked us 24 hours ago. That was a loss. 24 hours later, sitting here at 9:30 on Sunday night, I'm kind of feeling the Jets have a chance in this one. How big of a deal do you think it is, the fact that they're on the road and not at home?
Well, based on what we're seeing, it does feel like a pretty big deal. I think there's been a huge disparity between their home and road performance. I mean, all 3 home games, they played a good team game. They won 2 against good teams. And the Patriots game, I think we all agreed most of the team played well, and it was just the turnovers and Wilson struggling. So, and then the 4 road games, destroyed by the Broncos, destroyed by the Patriots. And they got pretty much dominated by the Panthers and Falcons too, even though they made those games pretty close at the end. So I think it is a pretty big deal, but all eyes are going to be on Mike White and whether he can replicate this performance and if he can create some sort of controversy with Wilson being able to return after that game. So, but this will be an interesting matchup for sure. There's a lot of former Colts on the Jets. These 2 teams have made quite a few trades, exchanged players. So it'll be interesting to see them for the first time in a few years. But I think the Colts are a decent team. I think they're, an average team. They almost beat the Titans this week. They played the Ravens really closely. They played the Rams closely. So they're a decent team, I think, on both sides of the ball, and playing on the road is going to be tough, but this looked like an entirely different team, Jets team this week. So it will be interesting to see if they can keep this going.
It's very similar to the Atlanta game for me, where it's, like Atlanta was, they're going to have to travel. They're going to deal with that. This one, it's going to be a short week, and it's the first short week for a very young coaching staff. Obviously all these guys have at least, experienced Thursday Night Football in some capacity, but it's a young team and it's a young coaching staff, a short week coming off a big win, big upset. Do you have a bit of that hangover? And I'm not saying look, the Jets are in no position to overlook anybody.
A good point. That's something I was kind of thinking about, is because both with this win and the Titans win, it feels like for this team that wins are still too big of a deal. Not that they shouldn't be enjoying it, but for this team is so bad, has been so bad for so long. There's so many players.
They've already matched their win total from last year.
There were so many guys who were here last year who lost 13 games in a row. Every single win still feels so huge, and they need to break out of that at some point where winning becomes more routine. And I know we said, wins don't really matter, but it's just about getting to the point where it's like, even if they don't go on a 5-game winning streak or whatever, it's just win a couple, lose one, win one, lose one. Just make winning a thing that can happen, where it's not a huge deal that you win one.
Exactly. Game. Yeah, every game. Yeah, that's a very good point. Every win feels like a playoff win at this point. And look, you shouldn't take anything away from the Jets because the 2 teams they've beaten are 2 of the top teams in the AFC. They just beat the number 1 team in the AFC, and it was a fully healthy Cincinnati Bengals team. It's not
Right.
like they didn't have Joe Mixon or Jamar Chase. Like I guess the Titans game, you can have the excuse that they didn't have A.J. Brown or Julio Jones. This game, Bengals fans are going to try to blame it on the refs, but you can't take anything away from these 2 wins. I mean, the Jets are a worse team than these 2 teams, and maybe they overlooked the Jets, but the Jets came out and gave their money's worth. And that was what we wanted to see. I think we've seen too many of the lackluster blowout games. And look, that Patriots game, if the Jets play tough the rest of the season, obviously they're not going to win that many games, even if they only finish with 5 wins. But that Patriots game is the last time they look even close to that embarrassing. I think you can take it. But at the onset of the season, it was like this team is going to beat teams they shouldn't, and they're going to lose to teams that they should beat. And you could argue there probably isn't a single team that they've lost to that they should have beaten, but they made games in Carolina and Atlanta that they were down a lot at half. Obviously, on the road against Denver and New England was tough. And then at home, they played a good game and Zach threw 4 interceptions. And then they've upset 2 of the top teams in the AFC. Like when you look at it, when you're able to zoom out and look at it from that perspective, this is kind of what we all signed up for. Maybe not the Mike White experience. I don't know if I had that on my Jets trivia card, but I kind of feel like the Jets are. I think they lose a close one. That's kind of how I feel. I kind of think that they play them tight, but I do think being on the road is a difference maker for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the travel or the home fans or whatever it is, but I just think I'm trying to be realistic with their expectations because the fan in me wants to say that we're about to blow the doors off of them, and the Mike White experience is here. But I think that Mike White has another sound, solid game, but I don't think it. I think that they'll ultimately fall in a close one. That's kind of the way I'm feeling. If I'm trying to be realistic about things, it's a short week, young staff on the road. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. What about you?
Yeah, the Colts have scored 25 in a row for 5 straight games, so it's going to be a tough task for the defense. But it's going to be on the offense to be able to keep up. I think it's going to be another shootout type of game.
Yeah.
As long as the Jets can make it competitive, because it's been so hard for this team in the past few years to even be competitive in road games, which, like you said, credit to them. They made the Carolina and Atlanta games competitive, even though they weren't playing good football. But the point you made about zooming out and kind of looking at this whole picture now is really important. And it's why this win is so important, because you look at it now, okay, they're 2-5. That's not that far off from the winning percentage I think you would realistically expect from them this season. That puts them on pace for 5 wins. They're over under with 6.5. They beat 2 really good teams. They lost 2 one-score games. They played a good team game against the Patriots. Now with this win in there, you can sort of look at it in this way where it's like, okay, we kind of expected this. But before this, you're coming off of that awful loss to the Patriots. Falcons game didn't feel good. But overall, we're 7 games into a 17-game season. You got to let the season play out. And then we could sort of look at this big picture. Okay, did we get the body of work that we want? Did this roster show that it's something that can be built upon into a contender next year? And wins like this, not even wins. The wins are great. Like I said, they are important to establish that winning mindset, which I think they still need to do. But most important is just the overall roster development. And this game was on that track even before it became a win at the end. So more competent football, that I think even in this Colts game is probably more important than this Bengals game, is just staying competitive because it's on the road, because we haven't seen this team do that yet. You play a good game on the road, even though Panthers and Falcons were 1 score, they did get dominated in those games for the most part. So for them to just continue being competitive and do it on the road against a pretty solid Colts team, I think would be another step forward in trying to show that this is a competent, progressing football team.
If they lose a shootout, I'll be plenty happy. I mean, I was at the point in the fourth quarter of the Bengals game where I was just like, you know what? No matter what happens, I'm happy with how they played. And that was kind of
when it was 31 when it was 31-20, I was already in that mode. Like this would have been a fun game to win, but I still feel like they accomplished a lot. Right. And then there was just that cherry on top of what came after.
And then we got touchdown, Shaq lost an interception, touchdown, Philly special. I mean, I did not envision that happening, but we'll take it. Obviously a super fun one. Very excited about seeing where this thing goes. I'm looking forward to seeing Zach Wilson back out there. I know the Mike White experience is pretty fun, but I'm curious to see how he bounces back. I mean, that's going to be the big storyline if Mike White keeps playing well, is how does Wilson handle this? How do the Jets handle this? I think obviously they're going to give the reins back to Zach Wilson, But then it's like you said, if he doesn't play well, those Mike White chants are maybe not going to be viewed in a positive light on our end. I mean, but look, like we said, we'll take anybody. We just want a winner at quarterback, and it doesn't really matter who it is. But I think, I think Wilson, I still am a big believer in. I think he's got to learn how to crawl before he can run, but I still think that he's the answer for this franchise. So I'm hoping that he's sitting back in the booth with LaFleur. He's watching this. He's seeing how taking the checkdowns can open up the deep shots in the rest of this offense. And we'll keep rolling. And also the Jets will get Becton back soon enough in the next few weeks. So that should open up the running game. So there's a lot to look forward to, even if the Jets are just outside of. You know what my goal is, Michael? My goal is to be able to get on the graphic, on the bubble graphic, when we get towards the end of the season and the show and playoffs. We don't have to be in the hunt. I just want to be. Actually, I guess it is in the hunt. We want to be at the bottom of the in the hunt graphic.
We do want to be in the hunt.
Yeah,
all the way to the bottom. The Rams 4-7. That's
right.
what we want to be.
Yeah, we want to be 4-7, like 5-8. Like you just kind of I guess now that there's 17 games, 8 wins isn't an automatic death sentence. But yeah, I think 4-7, something around there, where it's like, okay, we can see our team on the graphic. But it is pretty crazy that one more win and they'll surpass their win total from last year. But they have a good opportunity to do that on Thursday. So with that said, Michael, we'll get out of here. Hopefully you can follow us at 2AJ Pod on Twitter, Michael_Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. With that being said, we'll get out of here. Everybody have a great week. Enjoy this win for the next few days. And let's just hope the Jets don't break our hearts on Thursdays. Everybody have a good one.